Let's talk about Formula One. The first ever Formula One World Championship Grand Prix took place in Great Britain. It was the fifth British Grand Prix and the third one to be held at the Silverstone circuit. It was also promoted as the Grand Prix of Europe. Before the race, other non-championship races were held across Europe, with one Manuel Fangio winning in Pau and San Remo, and other two races won by Reg Parnell and Georges Grignard. As far as entries go, there was no Scuderia Ferrari, with Enzo Ferrari sending his cars to race at the Mons Grand Prix in Belgium because the race organisers offered a much better deal than their British counterparts. It's all about money, isn't it? So as a result, the entry list for the British Grand Prix looked like this, with a lot of British drivers joining to race in their home country for the weekend. Alfa Romeo even got Reg Parnell to race for the works team for the occasion. There were also not any German driver or team, as they were banned from racing after World War II. Raymond Mays would later cancel his entry prior to the race. The French Talbot Lego team showed up with a new Wilson pre-selector gearbox. It had the gear shifting knob at the wheel, and the drivers pre-selected the gears. With a little push of the clutch, the gears would engage automatically. This amazing technology was slow though and chewed up a lot of the engine's power. The cars belonging to each team looked almost identical, and numbers changed every race, so one way to tell the drivers apart, like Alfa Romeo did in this particular occasion, was to use different colored noses. Fangio had yellow, Farina blue, Fagioli white, and Parnell green. And it was indeed Alfa Romeo who locked out the first four positions of the grid in qualifying, with Farina setting a time of 1:50.8, just 2/10 ahead of Fangio. Then came Fagioli and guest driver Parnell. The fastest non-Alfa Romeo car was Birra's Maserati in 5th place, almost 2 seconds off the pole time. Cabantu and Martin were 6th and 7th for the Talbot Lago outfit. Baron de Graffenried was 8th, Louis Rosier 9th with his Talbot, and Walker 10th. Surprisingly, the British cars qualified all below the top 9, with the highest qualifier being Walker himself, putting his ERA in 10th. Felice Bonetto didn't attend the session, so he didn't race on Sunday. Come race day, there were nearly 150,000 people watching the race in Silverstone. That day the race was also supported by an international 500cc race, which was won by a very young Sterling Moss in a Cooper Jap, and a demonstration run by BRM for their new P15 model, which was driven around the track by Raymond Mays. As it was a big event, the race was also attended by King George VI, Queen Elizabeth, Princess Margaret, and the Earl and Countess of Mountbatten of Burma. The royal family also spoke to the drivers and to the other noble presence on the grid. Enrico Platei's team consisted of Swiss Baron Tullio de Graffenried and Thai Prince Birra. The start was given with the British flag by Italian Baron Antonio Brivio. Farina got a good start and kept P1 ahead of his three teammates. The Alfetta soon proved to be the class of the field, while Cabantu, which started 4th, dropped 4 places. On lap 2, the first ever DNF occurs, with Johnson coming in with a broken compressor. On the same lap, Walker gives his car to Tony Rolt, and Farina sets the fastest lap of the Grand Prix with a 1:50.6, 2/10 faster than his pole time. On lap 5, Rolt, who had got the car from Walker, also DNF'd with a broken gearbox, and 3 laps later, Martin is out with an oil pressure issue. The Alphas, meanwhile, keep switching up places at the front just to keep the crowd entertained. On lap 10, Fagioli is in the lead, then 5 laps later Fangio goes P1, and a lap later the lead goes back to Farina. Lap 24 comes around, and Chiron is out with a clutch issue, followed on lap 36 by Baron de Graffenried with an engine problem, forcing him to walk back to the pits. For the Alphas in the lead, it's time to pit for fuel. Refueling was allowed back then. And after a 30-second average stop, they're on their way still leading the Grand Prix. On lap 46, Crossley is out with a transmission issue, followed a lap later by Murray with an engine overheating problem. On lap 45, Fry gives the car to Brian Showy Taylor, who will bring it home to the end. On lap 49, Prince Birra pulls over out of fuel, but it won't be the last DNF. Fangio was glued to the back of Farina on lap 60 when suddenly runs wide and hits a straw bale. 2 laps later he pulls into the pits, discovering that the hit had caused an oil leak and he has to retire. At the end of the 70 laps, Farina brings the car home to win the 1950 British Grand Prix in front of Fagioli and Parnell, who at some point during the race had run over a hare, breaking his car's front grille. It's a 1-2-3 for Alfa Romeo at the end of the day. Farina got the first hat-trick of Formula 1 history, getting pole, win and fastest lap in the same race. Here's the final classification for the 1950 British Grand Prix. As you can see, any car which wasn't an Alfa Romeo was lapped a ridiculous number of times. It's a 1-2-3 for Alfa Romeo at the end of the day, with the Talbots of Cabantu and Rousier, who were battling each other closely, 4th and 5th. Then Gerard and Harrison with the British ERA cars. Then the other Talbot belonging to Esanchelin, and the 2 Maseratis of Hampshire and Shoei Taylor, which shared the drive with Fry, rounding up the top 10. Despite it being a race utterly dominated by the Italian team, and maybe even a boring race by today's standards, the first F1 World Championship race proved to be an enormous success. This is the provisional 1950 standings as of the British Grand Prix. We'll continue next week with the Monaco Grand Prix. Now cheers and have a good day everyone.